Alright, welcome back to J Central, the channel where we break down everything happening inside the Toronto Blue Jays organization. And today, my friends, we have something that is genuinely getting under my skin in the best possible way. Because we are talking about a move that, on the surface, might look like a minor roster shuffle, the kind of quiet transaction that barely gets a headline on a slow Tuesday in February. But when you dig into the numbers, when you really start pulling at the threads of what this trade would actually mean for this ball club heading into 2026, the picture becomes a lot more interesting than people are giving it credit for. So let's set the stage, because context is everything in baseball. The Toronto Blue Jays entered this offseason carrying a lot of questions and, honestly, a lot of wounds. The Bo Bichette situation. Look, we are not going to spend the whole video relitigating that one because we have covered it extensively here on the channel. But the short version is that losing your franchise shortstop, the face of your infield, in free agency is not a small thing. That is a gap in your lineup and a gap in your identity. And then on top of that, the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes came and went, and Toronto was not the team that walked away with the prize. 2 big swings in free agency, 2 misses. Now the front office has to pivot. And the question everyone is asking right now, the question I have been getting in the comments section almost daily, and by the way, if you have not dropped a comment yet, go ahead and do that right now. Tell me what you think the Jays absolutely must do this offseason. Seriously, I read every single one. The question is, where does this team go from here? And here is the answer that the front office seems to be landing on. If you cannot plug every hole through free agency signings, you go to the trade market. You identify what your actual weaknesses are, you find a team that has what you need but cannot fully use it, and you make a deal that makes sense for everybody. That is the philosophy. That is how smart organizations operate when the free agent pool dries up before you get what you want. And when you look at the Toronto Blue Jays roster with honest eyes, not Homer glasses, real honest evaluation, the single most glaring structural problem is not the lineup. It is the bullpen. Specifically, the left side of the bullpen. Now, before anyone comes at me in the comments, and I know you will, because this community does not let anything slide, and I love you all for it. Before you say it, yes, Jeff Hoffman is excellent. Tyler Rogers has been incredibly reliable. This bullpen has real pieces and real depth on the right side. But left-handed relievers? Arms that can come in specifically to neutralize tough left-handed bats in high-leverage situations late in playoff games? That is where the inventory gets thin. That is where a general manager loses sleep when October rolls around. Because in the postseason, when opposing managers are stacking lefties in their lineup to exploit your bullpen holes, you need that weapon. You need that guy. And right now, the Blue Jays do not have a clear answer there. Enter JoJo Romero. And if that name does not immediately ring a bell for you, that is actually kind of the point, because Romero has been doing elite-level work in relative obscurity for a while now, and the analytics community has been quietly taking notice while the casual fan base has not caught up yet. He is a 29-year-old left-handed reliever currently under contract with the St. Louis Cardinals. In his 2025 season, it was legitimately one of the more underrated performances by a reliever in the entire National League. We are talking about a 2.07 ERA over 61 innings of work. Let that number sink in. 2.07. In today's offensive environment, in 2025, that is not just good, that is elite. That is a number that contending teams build acquisition strategies around. But here is the thing, and this is where it gets genuinely complicated from a business standpoint. JoJo Romero is entering the final year of his current contract. After 2026, he becomes a free agent. And the St. Louis Cardinals, who are very much in the middle of a rebuilding cycle right now, are not going to be in a position to pay a reliever on a multi-year extension when their organizational priority is building around youth and developing their farm system back into a consistent contender. So you have a situation where a very good pitcher is on a team that cannot fully leverage what he brings to the table, both in terms of winning now and in terms of long-term roster commitment. That creates a trade market. And Toronto sits on the other side of that trade market with a real need and real assets to offer. Now, how does this deal actually get structured? What are the pieces moving in both directions? That is exactly what we are going to break down in the next block, so do not go anywhere. And while you are still here, if you are getting value out of this breakdown, if this is the kind of deep analysis that you want more of on this channel, smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps us reach more Jays fans who are hungry for real content, not just surface-level takes. Hit the like button, drop a comment, and let's keep rolling. Okay, so now we are getting into the meat of this. We have established why Toronto needs a left-handed reliever. We have established why Romero makes a lot of sense as the target. Now the natural question is, what does a trade actually look like? What are the Cardinals asking for? Because every trade has two sides, and you cannot evaluate the deal without understanding what you are giving up just as much as what you are getting back. The name that keeps coming up in discussions around this potential deal is Davis Schneider. And again, comment section, tell me how you feel about this one, because I know Schneider has a very passionate fan base among the Jays faithful, and I want to hear your honest reaction. Schneider is a 27-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who put up a .797 OPS last season. He has power in his bat. He has positional flexibility that allows him to slide around the outfield depending on what a roster needs on any given night, and crucially, this is the part that makes him a real chip in any negotiation. He is under team control all the way through the 2029 season. In front office terms, that is gold. That is 4 more years of a potentially productive bat at below market cost, which is exactly the kind of asset rebuilding organizations covet. So the proposed framework that has been circulating in trade analysis circles is essentially a one-for-one swap. Davis Schneider goes to St. Louis. JoJo Romero comes to Toronto. Clean. Direct. Both teams get something they demonstrably need. Both teams give up something they can afford to lose given their respective situations and timelines. Let's start with why this makes sense for the Cardinals, because I think that side of the equation is actually easier to explain, and it sets up the Toronto analysis really well. St. Louis has been in a transitional phase. They have moved significant veteran contracts off the books. Names that were anchoring their roster for years are gone or on the way out, and the organization is committed to a philosophy of accumulating young, controllable talent while their prospect pipeline matures. In that context, acquiring a 27-year-old outfielder who they control at a reasonable salary for 4 more years is completely aligned with their organizational strategy. Schneider gives them a right-handed bat with real pop in a lineup that needs offensive contributions from multiple spots. And from a roster construction standpoint, having a player who can play multiple outfield spots means your manager has flexibility. You are not buying a one-dimensional piece. You are buying utility and production at an affordable number. For a Cardinals front office trying to stretch every dollar while rebuilding, that profile checks every box. Now from Toronto's perspective, and this is where I want to spend real time, because this is the more complicated emotional calculus for Jays fans. Giving up Davis Schneider is not painless. Let me be very clear about that. He is not a throw-in piece. He is not organizational depth that you forget about 3 weeks after the trade. He is a legitimate major league contributor who has shown he can impact games. His OPS last season puts him solidly in the above-average offensive tier for outfielders. So any honest evaluation of this trade has to acknowledge, Toronto is giving up something real. But here is the framework I want you to apply when thinking about this. The 2026 Toronto Blue Jays are not a team that is thinking about 2029. They are not a team in year 2 of a 5-year rebuild. They are a team that, even after the losses they have absorbed this offseason, still has a core built around competing now. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is in his prime. George Springer is still producing. The starting rotation has meaningful pieces. This is a win-now organization. And when you are a win-now organization, the currency of controllable years on a position player means slightly less to you than it would to a rebuilding club, because your priority is optimizing your 2026 roster to compete in what promises to be a brutally competitive American League East. And here is where Romero becomes a genuinely impactful acquisition rather than just a nice-to-have depth move. In a 7-game playoff series, which is ultimately what every decision this offseason should be pointing toward, your bullpen construction is everything. Managers live and die by their late-inning options. The ability to bring in a left-handed arm with a 2.07 ERA who can get big outs in high-leverage spots is not a luxury. It is a competitive necessity against the Yankees, the Rays, the Red Sox. These are lineups built with left-handed power. These are teams that will expose your bullpen gaps the moment they identify them. And Romero's salary situation adds another layer of practicality that I think gets overlooked in the conversation. He is set to earn approximately $4.26 million for the 2026 season. In a landscape where elite relievers are signing multi-year deals worth far more than that on the open market, getting Romero's production at that number represents genuine value. Toronto gets one elite year of a left-handed reliever at a cost that does not compromise their ability to address other roster needs. The one-year nature of the contract does carry some risk. You are not building a long-term partnership here, but for a team trying to push over the top in 2026, 1 year of elite bullpen production is exactly what the situation calls for. I want to take a second here and genuinely ask you something, because your perspective matters to me and it shapes the content I make on this channel. Do you think Davis Schneider is too high a price to pay for 1 year of Romero? Or do you think the Blue Jays have enough offensive depth that they can absorb losing him? Drop your answer in the comments. I am going to be reading through every response because this is exactly the kind of debate that makes covering this team so compelling. And if this video is giving you that itch, if you are leaning over in your chair and feeling engaged with where this story is going, hit the like button. It takes literally 2 seconds, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of real, detailed Jays content is worth pushing to more people who care about this team. Okay, let's close this out with the big picture. All right, we have laid out the context, we have walked through the trade anatomy, and now I want to do what I love doing most on this channel, zooming out and asking the real question. Not just is this trade fair in a vacuum, not just does it make sense on a spreadsheet, but does acquiring JoJo Romero actually move the needle for Toronto in a meaningful way? Does it change the ceiling of what this team can accomplish in 2026? Because ultimately, that is the only lens that matters when you are a contending franchise. And my answer, after really sitting with the data, after looking at how the postseason typically plays out for teams with bullpen vulnerabilities, after considering what the American League East is going to look like this season, my answer is yes. But it comes with important nuance, and I am going to walk you through exactly where that nuance lives. First, let's talk about what Romero actually does when he gets to Toronto and how his role would be defined. This is not a closer acquisition. Toronto already has closer caliber arms. What Romero represents is something arguably more valuable in the modern game. A high-leverage middle reliever with a clear handedness advantage. He is the guy you bring in the 7th inning when a dangerous left-handed bat is stepping to the plate with runners in scoring position and the game on the line. He is the arm that neutralizes the specific threat that currently exists in Toronto's bullpen. In a perfectly constructed playoff bullpen. And remember, the Blue Jays absolutely have postseason aspirations for 2026. You want multiple weapons at different junctions of the game. Romero fills a junction that was previously either empty or filled by options that were not optimal. Now let's talk about what his 2026 specifically might look like in a Blue Jays uniform, because I think this is where the acquisition becomes truly intriguing. Romero spent his time in St. Louis on a rebuilding team, a team that, despite being a storied franchise, was not competing for championships in 2025. His innings were accumulated in a lower-pressure organizational context. Now imagine moving him to a contending roster, pitching in games that actually matter in September, pitching in front of Rogers Center crowds that are fully invested in October baseball. There is a real argument to be made that Romero elevates when the context demands it, that a pitcher of his caliber performing at a 2.07 ERA in reduced circumstances could be even more locked in when the stakes rise. That is speculation, yes. But it is informed speculation based on the profile of what elite relievers typically do when they land in winning environments. There is also a secondary benefit here that I want to flag because I do not think it gets discussed enough in trade analysis. When you strengthen your bullpen, you indirectly take pressure off your starting rotation. When a manager knows he has proven, trusted arms he can hand the ball to in the 6th or 7th inning, he can be more aggressive about protecting his starters, managing pitch counts more carefully, pulling a starter before the 3rd time through the lineup when the matchups flip. Romero's presence does not just affect the late innings directly. It creates a ripple effect through your entire game management philosophy. That is a qualitative benefit that does not show up in the ERA box, but absolutely shows up in how many games you win across a 162-game season. Now let me address the counterargument honestly, because I think intellectual honesty is what separates real analysis from just cheerleading. The legitimate concern about this trade from Toronto's perspective is the one-year nature of Romero's commitment. You are trading a player you control for 4 years to get a player you control for 1 year. In pure asset terms, that is a negative return on investment from a long-term construction standpoint. If Romero pitches great in 2026 and then walks into free agency and signs with a division rival, you will have permanently improved the Cardinals at a net organizational loss. That is a real risk. It is not imaginary. It is not something you can just wave away. But here is how I think about that risk in context. The Blue Jays are not building for 2030. They are building for now. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is at peak age. The roster has a competitive window that is open right this moment. And every year you let that window stay open without maximizing your chances is a year you cannot get back. Trading some future asset value, which is what 4 years of Davis Schneider represents, for a proven impact piece that increases your 2026 win probability is exactly how a smart, win-now organization should be operating. You make this trade, you go all in on 2026, and then you reassess after the season. If Romero performs and you want to extend him, you have the standing offer advantage. If he does not, you have not mortgaged your future because Schneider's 4-year control was never the thing your 2026 championship window was built around. I also want to contextualize this for fans who are feeling anxious about the offseason overall. Losing Bichette hurt. The Tucker miss stings. But the front office is not standing still. They are working the trade market. They are identifying realistic upgrades that fit the organizational philosophy. This Romero deal, if and when it happens, is a sign that the team is committed to making this roster as dangerous as possible before the season begins. It is one piece of a larger puzzle. And in baseball, sometimes the quieter pieces, the pieces that do not make the screaming headline on the sports desk, end up being the ones that matter most when you are deep in October and every single out feels like it costs a year off your life. So where does that leave us? The Toronto Blue Jays adding JoJo Romero to their bullpen would represent a real, meaningful upgrade to one of their most identifiable weaknesses. It addresses a specific postseason vulnerability. It fits their financial structure. It makes them a more complete team in the most important metric there is. What does your roster look like when it actually counts? And on the flip side, St. Louis gets exactly what a rebuilding organization needs: a young, controllable, right-handed bat who can contribute while their pipeline develops. Neither team is robbing the other. Both teams are solving a real problem. That is a well-constructed trade. We will keep monitoring this one closely here at Jays Central, because the offseason is not over and the details matter. If anything develops, if a deal gets announced, if new names get floated, if the asking price changes, you will hear about it on this channel first. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have notifications turned on so you do not miss any of our coverage as we get closer to spring training. And before I let you go, I need you to do 2 things. First, drop a comment below telling me your honest take. Is this trade something you want to see happen, or do you think Davis Schneider is too valuable to move? I want real answers, not just hype. So give me your genuine baseball opinion. And second, hit that like button. Seriously, if you watched this whole video, if you got value from the breakdown, the like button is the single easiest way to support what we are doing here and help us grow this community of Jays fans who actually care about the details. One click. That is all it takes. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of Jays Central, and we will see you in the next one.